Welcome to the Minimalist Educator Podcast, where the focus is on a less is more approach to education. Join your hosts, Christine Arnold and Tammy Musiałowski, authors of The Minimalist Teacher and Your School Leadership Edit, a minimalist approach to rethinking your school ecosystem, each week as they explore practical ways to simplify your work, sharpen your focus, and amplify what matters most so you can teach and lead with greater clarity, purpose, and joy.
On this week's episode, we are joined by Sharyn Skrtic to talk about frameworks for high-quality learning environments. Her pared down pointer is to ensure that you are asking questions. Sharyn Skrtic is an international accreditation leader at the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. In this role, her focus is on supporting the school's unique context and providing ongoing guidance throughout the accreditation process. She has held various teaching and senior leadership positions at IB international schools in Germany, Hong Kong, Singapore, Finland, and Japan, including PYP coordinator, principal, and head of learning. Sharyn is an IBAN member, serving as a workshop leader for both online and face-to-face workshops, as well as supporting schools as program and evaluation leader. She also supports the PYP community as a moderator on the IB Exchange. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Minimalist Educator Podcast. We are very excited this week to be joined by a former colleague of ours, Sharyn Skrtic. Welcome to the podcast, Sharyn.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we all worked together many moons ago now back in Singapore. Sharyn was our PYP coordinator and our deputy principal. Did you move into the principalship as well there? Yeah, just trying to remember.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, my last year there. My last year. Yeah.
Awesome. Would you mind starting by telling our listeners a little bit about your career in education?
Yeah, definitely. It's started, actually, this was the 25 years this year was in education. And I actually started primary is where my heart is. So I'm a primary teacher at heart and started teaching in the States in my old grade school where I went to. So that's where I began my teaching career. But after 5 years, something drew me over the waters and overseas. So ended up in Dusseldorf, Germany, where I was first introduced to everything, international schools, the IB programs, and that was a lot of firsts for me. But from there, definitely have had different teaching and leadership positions across the continents. Moved to Hong Kong from there, spent some time with you two wonderful people in Singapore. Actually was in Helsinki, Finland, where I was also PYP coordinator and had a primary. And then went on to Kyoto, Japan, where I also still stayed with PYP, but also was head of teaching and learning as they were building their MYP and then their DP programs. So yeah, definitely had many different positions in international schools, most of which were also with IB, schools that offered the IB programs.
And you're currently in The Hague.
I am.
Yeah. Not at this moment, but that's where you live.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And your travels, or like living travels, your job has taken you in to some really interesting places. And we're always curious about trends. What kind of things, like you've been in similar roles, but very different cultural places. But what kind of trends have you noticed from your very beginnings as a teacher through your roles? And that might include this role now, but, maybe the more school-based roles. But we're interested to hear about that.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I have been in, I think, very different contexts, and which is a big part of my role currently, because every school has their unique culture, their unique context. And I think something that's always stuck with me wherever I've been with any school or whatever my role was always important that what we were doing was what was best for our learners. I think that as a big trend is something that should never leave. I hope it's never not a trend, and that what we're doing with our schools, what we're doing actually involves our learners. And I see more and more of that with the schools that I continue to visit, is that, what we're doing has to be very purposeful for our learners. And in order to know if we're being purposeful, we need to hear from our learners. So I think, we can easily say student agency or autonomy is important, but I think I do see it. I see it in a lot of the schools that I attend, how their voice matters. And not, and you can take that as a layered approach. We see students being involved in co-constructing the curriculum, right? But we also see students involved in part of the decision-making of what goes on in their own learning environments. And we see learners, also having opportunities to be the teachers. We had this great podcast webinar that we do with NEASC, and we had one of our schools share how their learners led the professional learning day for the teachers. It was amazing to listen to. So, something that's, I think, has been a trend, I think, for me, but I also see it more and more, is making sure that our learners' voice is valued and that there's space for it. Another thing that, I think a lot of schools are thinking about now, we work with NEASC, we work with, K to 12 schools, and I would say a lot of momentum I'm seeing now is around schools thinking about different pathways for their learners as they get up into 9, 10, the upper grades, up and through high school ages. What are different pathways that students might have the opportunity to take? And not that any pathway would be less than another one, but what are possible pathways where students could be exploring more things that might be of interest to them in terms of where they want to go in the future, how they might be able to demonstrate or show growth in terms of competencies, and just different than what maybe the both of you and I probably find when we think back to our high school, which was very much a certain path that everyone took, and this is what it is, and this is what you do. So I'm seeing a lot of that, and that involves a lot of conversations with schools, and hopefully it will increase to have conversations with universities as well.
Yeah, that's really exciting to hear that schools are going in that sort of direction. I know because I'm in a PYP school myself, so often when we jump onto the PYP webinars that are offered, there's Sharyn, which is lovely. I get to see you all the time, it feels like. And so you do something similar for NEASC as well. How do you know what topics to do these webinars on? Is it led by these trends that you're seeing, or is it, requests that are out there? Like, how do you make those choices about what to offer?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think, for the PYP ones, we hear what's going on with schools, and we have a lot of schools asking and telling us this is, what we'd like to see more examples of. And I think with NEASC as well, our schools, we're a community of schools. NEASC we actually have 3 commissions. So we have the 2 commissions that are in the states. So there's the Commission on Public Schools in the New England states, and then the Commission on Independent Schools. And then, of course, I work with the Commission of International Schools, and we have schools in 90 countries. And as I said at the beginning, they're all unique and different and have so much to share with everyone else. So I think with our webinars that we do for our international community of schools, we do try and think about, first of all, some of the big key concepts, if you will, of NEASC, which are, we really value this idea of focusing more on impact than on inputs, which I think maybe traditionally in the past, accreditation has maybe been a bit more focused on inputs. So we might draw out schools to share how they're exploring that idea. And then also a big idea, which is we call it a framework for high quality learning, but it's really kind of a roadmap for schools to really make sure and ensuring that there is high quality learning for all learners. And so we might ask schools who are doing a lot of work in that area, who might be further developed, to share some of their stories. And of course, we also have schools who are, they may just say, we're so excited, we want to share our work in this area. Can we jump on and do a webinar for you in particular about a specific NEASC ACE learning principle? And so it kind of, it varies. And it's great that we have schools that are kind of coming to us and saying, we want to share, which is always exciting to kind of raise up those schools and those voices.
That's very exciting work. And to know that there are so many schools that are looking to share what they've been doing to help elevate learner voices. In some of the contexts that I have worked in, that is not the case. And it's not that I don't think it's an intentional, I don't want to say ignoring of student voice or learner voice, but maybe there just isn't the knowing what the resources are or where to start. Because I think that even as classroom teachers, right, it's kind of letting go of some control, right? So how do we introduce a big idea of like, we're going to let our students help us make some decisions because this is their education. So what would you say to some folks who are like thinking about making this kind of shift, like from kind of more traditional schooling to, what we really want to focus on what our students actually like really need versus what we think they need?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And it really, it actually aligns and speaks well to the NEASC community of schools, because we do have schools, who are on a continuum. That's the great thing, I think, with the work I do with NEASC and their accreditation, it's a continuum, right? It's a development. It's not a yes, you're accredited or no. There are rigorous standards, but it's a developmental transformation for schools. And we do have schools who are right now maybe working at a traditional, what we might say is a traditional sense, and some who are, as I said, having students lead the teacher professional development. When we work with schools, our pathway, which is the ACE learning pathway, actually is based on these 10 ACE learning principles rooted in research. And we try and help schools see that, you don't tackle this all at once, right? And that's why I'm really excited to dig more deeper into your second book, because it's this idea of, capacity overload and, initiative overload. And when we talk about capacity, it's not just always, we need more and more. It's prioritizing, maybe first what we have and what we can do. And something like, student agency, or our learning principle 5, which is learner autonomy and engagement, it will take time, because you are working with your whole community of learners who need to, I think, first understand the why, right? Why are we even saying that learners should have a choice or have voice in your school? And we actually, we provide our own kind of research-based rationale for all of our learning principles. And we say to schools, start there, because we know as being educators, teachers in schools, principals, we want to know the why and to why we're, what's the benefit for our students. And then, I don't know if it's a common phrase, but, every small step still matters. So it might be your teacher starting with just, for 30 minutes of the day, their students help them plan that time, right? Like, how should we organize our time right now? Like, what do you think is most important for us to do? It may be looking at their current structures that they do have. Maybe schools have like a student council, and maybe it's them reflecting and saying, okay, how does this actually work? What voices are included here? Are there other ways we might consider other voices, how other voices could be involved? And I think that's one of the great parts of what I get to do with schools is we're more of a partner. And we, as you just asked, schools always have questions, and we partner with them to try and work with them, offering workshops that we can do with them and with the school community, providing resources about our learning principles. So it's definitely something that's important for NEASC, especially for our team when we go and work with schools.
It feels like such a relevant thing for schools to be
tackling in this day and age with the modern world, to really be incorporating elements of that student agency, for sure.
Yeah.
The work that we do with the podcast and the books and everything that we do, it is a lot about, how can we keep our colleagues in education, in the profession, and, engaged and happy and not, burning out and that sort of thing. So I'd love to, with your perspective of all these different schools around the world, I'd love to hear what are some commonalities that you see where teachers are happy and engaged in the work that they're doing. What are those schools doing right to keep the teachers really happily, positively engaged in the work that they're doing?
Yeah, no, it's a big question. It's a great question. And I think, I think something that, and I always think back to, like, in the different roles I've had in schools, something that made me feel engaged in that school and wanting to remain and give as much as I could. It helped when there was, I don't want this to sound too simplistic, but when there was clarity in the school. You know how much goes on in a school day. We know, no school day, every day is different. And of course, that's always going to be, I think, right? That's just what we're working with and what we do. But when schools, I think, can be very clear about the coherence of who they are, and I am going to pull a little from NEASC here, because what we see is when schools can be clear about what are our highest aspirations, what are we clear about what our guiding statements are. These are the biggest aspirations we have for our learners. And if we're clear about that, but we also pull from that to know what truly is our vision of our learner, what are the actual, call them impacts, qualities, competencies, what are those that we identify that our learners will develop over their time in our school, right? And then in addition to that, what do we agree as a community is shared practice in any learning space in the school that we agree to will provide opportunities to develop those vision of a learner to meet those highest aspirations. So I believe when schools are clear and coherent about that provides the educators with a feeling of, okay, everything's grounded then in this understanding of this is who we are, this is what we value about high quality learning. Because then we see teachers can say, okay, it's not a one room schoolhouse where every room you close the door and there's something else, something different going on. And it's like, wait, but I'm trying to give this message to the students. And if we're doing this, so this idea is really how we phrase it with NEASC as like a shared understanding, right, of high quality learning, but it involves those intersecting pieces. And then as a teacher, I know, okay, well, this is what I'm agreeing to. This is my pedagogy to develop these impacts, qualities. So I know now I can anchor my professional learning in that. I can, self-reflect on where we are as a school with that. And I know that's a shared practice with everyone in the school. So I want to continue to be a part of that. And then I also can then see that my students know what's expected in their learning experiences and, what's expected of them as they reflect and grow in those competencies and those skills. So, I think it's a place where, where schools want to retain their teachers and providing that clarity, but then also teachers have voice too. So including teachers in the processes of what's going on in the school, providing, that transparency. I think those are, some of the bigger ideas I think that want to keep teachers in the community that they're in.
I know, sorry, Tammy, I know you're going to jump in,
No,
but I just want to say, I love that you just said clarity, because when Tammy and I think about our time in Singapore, that always comes up, doesn't it, Tammy? Every single time we're
always.
like, we knew our leadership provided us with clear direction. We knew exactly what we were working on. So I'm so happy that you said that. That's awesome.
Yeah. And that's actually what I was going to say, Christine, too, is that I learned a lot in those couple of years working with you in just really understanding exactly what you just said, right? Like we have to know exactly in a shared understanding, we all have the same direction that we want to go with the kids, and how are we going to do that? And that work is deep. It's really, really deep work and reflective. And sometimes schools don't have the time carved out to do that, but they need to, right? Like it's an essential piece of being able to move forward. And so I'm glad that you just really outlined that, because I was, same, Christine. I'm like, yep, I have like this visual of us in our multi-purpose room at tables with chart paper and standards and all the things. And that is something that I try to do in workshops with people, like really dig into that process. When you work with people through those kind of processes, what kind of ahas come about?
Yeah, I think, and as is going back, we have schools across the continuum, and some schools are really developing this idea. Okay, what does this mean for us? And some schools, might have a fully developed, let's say, definition of learning. But I think NEASC pushes on that and says, okay, I know it's a language thing, but there's a difference between having a school having a definition of something versus a shared understanding in practice, right? And I guess so. And I think when we start to workshop with schools, because this is a part of some of the set workshops we have, but also we can do more bespoke ones for schools based on where they are. Definitely this idea of the shared daily pedagogy, right? Because what happens is then schools will start to list all the things that they do, right? And these are inputs. These are things that we do. Okay, we do them. And are we clear about all of those? What's the actual desired impact we want to happen if we're doing this input, right? And then they'll start thinking, well, I don't know why we do this particular thing, right? And so in one of our protocols, we ask the schools in their report that they will do based on all of their internal reflections is, what are you going to start doing? What are you going to stop doing? Because again, going back to capacity, okay, there are some things that we don't need to be doing, because do we first of all even know why we're doing them? What do we have a desired impact? And then if we don't, is that something that we really want to align with what we're saying about, what we value in terms of high quality learning? So I think a lot of ahas come from that, and they start to think. And I think also one of our learning principles, which looks at how a school uses their learning space and time, is a big aha. Spaces in schools go beyond just your classroom. And so really exploring and playing with how do we use different spaces in terms of supporting what we say is our shared pedagogy. You both have seen a lot of schools, and a lot of times we'll see mission statements that talk about collaboration, or visions of a learner say that we're collaborative. But then you'll go into the spaces, and I don't know if you can see how that supports, collaboration. So I think a lot of ahas come also when schools can really reflect on the spaces they use, and also how time is used.
Super reluctant to stop our conversation, but I can see the time ticking away, Sharyn. We always ask for a pair down pointer at the end of an episode. So just one tip or tool or strategy that we use just to pare things back and prioritize something you'd like to share with our listeners.
Yeah, I guess, one thing I would say, and I think it helps schools, is to ask questions. I think we know as learners that they learn a lot based on how they have the space to ask questions. And I think schools can do the same. And I know it's, we talk about, finding time, but it's super important for schools to take the time to understand who they are and to ask questions about the things they're doing. Because, my colleague always says, if a school doesn't know where they're going, they might end up someplace they don't want to be. And I think what I was talking about before in terms of, that high quality learning and that having a shared understanding of that is so important.
Oh man, I hope lots of people listen to this episode. We are going to have to do some massive, massive sharing because you hit on so many important points that, Christine and I and people in our kind of camp and network talk about often, but we don't always see it out there. And so, the more we talk about it and the more we emphasize the importance of being clear in who we are and people are understanding, like you said, like a definition is different from an understanding of it. And so if we get more people working through these processes, schools will just be in a better place. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sharyn. It was so great to chat with you again. Thank you for being with us for this episode.
No, it was so wonderful to connect with you two again. It's bringing back a lot of memories of Singapore, which is wonderful. So thank you so much for inviting me.
This episode is sponsored by Plan Z Education Services, supporting educators with forward-thinking professional learning that puts both student impact and teacher wellness at the centre. Driven by a vision to teach less, impact more, they help educators find purpose, prioritise what matters, and simplify their practice. Learn more at planzeducation.com.
Thank you for listening to the Minimalist Educator Podcast. Join Christine and Tammy and guests again next time for more conversations about how to simplify and clarify the responsibilities and tasks in your role. If today's episode helped you rethink, reimagine, reduce, or realign something in your practice, share it in a comment or with a colleague. For resources and updates, visit planzeducation.com and subscribe to receive weekly emails. Until next time, keep it simple and stay intentional.